I moved into the studio apartment because it was cheap, cheaper than anything else in the city that wasn't a complete dump. It wasn't great, just a small room with a kitchenette, a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in, and a single window that overlooked a cracked asphalt lot. But I wasn't picky. The landlord warned me about the noise, though. The unit was part of a converted commercial building, and my place was right above a row of storage units. People came and went at all hours, rolling up those heavy metal doors, slamming them shut. I figured I could live with it. Rent was low, and I had no neighbors on either side, just an empty hallway leading to a metal staircase that took me down to the parking lot. It was supposed to be a fresh start. That night, I had just finished eating a microwaved burrito when I grabbed my trash bag and headed outside. The air was thick with that city smell. Hot pavement, old garbage, something greasy frying in the distance. I tossed the bag into the dumpster and turned back toward the stairs when I noticed it. One of the storage units wasn't fully closed. The metal door had been pulled down but not locked, leaving a gap just big enough to see inside. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought, but something about it made me stop. Maybe it was the way the light from inside flickered against the concrete, or maybe it was just curiosity. Either way, I stepped closer and crouched down. Inside, it looked like someone had been living there. A thin, dirty mattress was pushed against the back wall, surrounded by empty takeout containers, crumpled fast food bags, and a half-empty water bottle. There was even a phone plugged into a portable charger, its screen casting a faint blue glow. My stomach twisted. I knew people squatted in storage units sometimes, but seeing it up close was different. This wasn't just someone crashing for a night. They had settled in. I stood up quickly, suddenly feeling like I was intruding. I wasn't sure what to do. Tell the landlord? Call the police? Before I could decide, something shifted inside. The mattress creaked. Someone was in there. I stepped back instinctively, my pulse hammering. The gap in the door was too small to see much, but I felt a presence, the kind that makes the hairs on your arms stand up. I expected a face to appear, for someone to lunge at me or yell, but nothing happened. Just silence. A tense, stretched-out silence that made my skin crawl. Then, as I turned to leave, I heard it. A slow, deliberate scratching against the metal door. Not frantic, not random, just steady. I didn't stay to find out what it meant. I hurried up the stairs, forcing myself not to run, not to look back. But as I locked my apartment door behind me, heart pounding in my chest, I had the horrible feeling that whoever was in that storage unit had been expecting me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was just some homeless guy trying to get out of the cold. Maybe he didn't even realize I had seen him. But as I lay in bed that night, the scratching sound wouldn't leave my head. I kept imagining long, dirty fingernails dragging across the metal, slow and deliberate, like he was testing something. I barely slept, jumping at every little sound from below, rolling doors, distant voices, the occasional thud of something heavy being moved. It was normal storage unit noise, but now it felt different, like I was hearing it for the first time. By morning, I had almost convinced myself I had overreacted. But then, I noticed something. My apartment door was unlocked. I was sure I had locked it the night before. I remembered twisting the deadbolt, checking it twice, but now it clicked open with barely a touch. My stomach turned. I lived alone. No one else had a key. I stepped inside cautiously, scanning the room. Nothing looked out of place. My laptop was still on the counter, my wallet next to it. If someone had been inside, they hadn't taken anything. Still, the feeling wouldn't leave me. The air felt wrong, like something had been disturbed in a way I couldn't quite place. That's when I saw it. The closet door was open, just an inch or two. I never left it open. I stood there, heart pounding, every instinct screaming at me to leave. But I had to know. I inched forward and pulled the door open the rest of the way. Nothing. Just my clothes hanging in a neat row, my shoes lined up at the bottom. I exhaled sharply, shaking my head at myself. I was being paranoid. Maybe I had forgotten to lock the door. Maybe the closet door had swung open on its own. I told myself all of that, but deep down I knew better. Someone had been in here. They had stood right where I was standing now, breathing this same air. And worst of all, they hadn't taken anything. They had just been here, watching. That night I pushed a chair against the door before going to bed. It felt ridiculous, like something a kid would do after a scary movie. But I needed the extra security, even if it was just in my head. I lay awake for hours, listening. Every time I started to drift off, I would jolt awake, convinced I had heard something. A creak, a breath, footsteps just outside my door. But nothing ever came. Eventually, exhaustion won. I must have fallen asleep around 3 a.m., because the next thing I remember was waking up to my phone buzzing. A notification. Groggy, I reached for it, but when I saw the screen, every trace of sleep vanished. It was a photo of me, asleep in my bed. And it had been taken from inside my apartment. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. My breath caught in my throat as I stared at the picture. The angle was slightly tilted, like it had been taken in a hurry. The dim glow of my bedside lamp barely lit the frame, but there was no mistaking it. That was me, lying right where I was now. I sat up so fast my vision blurred. My first instinct was to check the door, but the chair was still wedged against it, unmoved. The locks were in place. There was no way anyone had gotten in. And yet, someone had. I scrambled out of bed, flipping on every light in the apartment. My heart felt like it was trying to tear out of my chest. I checked under the bed, inside the closet again, even inside the tiny bathroom cabinet. Nothing. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. The walls of my apartment suddenly felt too thin, the air too heavy. I checked my phone again, this time clicking on the number that had sent the photo. No name. Just a string of digits I didn't recognize. My fingers hovered over the screen. Call the police. The landlord. What would I even say? That someone had taken a picture of me in my sleep but left no trace of how they got in? I needed proof. I forced myself to breathe, to think. If someone had been inside, they had to have a way in. A key? A hidden entrance? My eyes darted around the apartment, trying to piece it together. And then, it hit me. The storage units. They were directly below me. If one of them had access to the building's old maintenance tunnels or crawl spaces, I didn't let myself finish the thought. Instead, I grabbed my phone, a flashlight, and a kitchen knife, because I sure as hell wasn't going down there unarmed, and stepped into the hallway. The air was stale, heavy with that industrial dust-covered smell of old concrete. Every instinct told me to turn back, but I had to know. The stairwell felt darker than usual, the single flickering bulb barely cutting through the shadows. When I reached the bottom, I could see that same storage unit, the one I had peeked into the night before. Only this time the door was fully shut. My stomach twisted. I crept forward every step, deliberate. The metal felt ice cold as I curled my fingers under the handle and lifted. It rolled up with a hollow clatter, and my flashlight beam sliced through the darkness. The mattress was still there, the empty food containers, the phone plugged into the charger. But now something else sat in the center of the unit. A single Polaroid photo. I picked it up with numb fingers and turned it over. My blood went cold. It was another picture of me, taken from inside my apartment. But this one was from weeks ago. I staggered back, my mind racing. Weeks ago. That meant whoever had been in my apartment wasn't just watching me now. They had been doing it for a while. Living under me. Studying me. I swallowed hard, my throat dry. My flashlight beam flickered over the walls of the unit. And that's when I saw it. An opening. A square hole in the back wall, just big enough for a person to squeeze through. The edges were rough, chipped away, like someone had carved it out slowly over time. My stomach twisted. It led somewhere inside the building. I took a step forward, but the moment my light hit the darkness beyond that hole, I knew. I couldn't go in there. A sound snapped me back to reality. A creak, from above, from my apartment. My blood ran cold. I spun on my heel and bolted. Up the stairs 2 at a time, my pulse hammering in my ears. The moment I reached my door, I saw it. The chair I had wedged against it? It was moved, not knocked over, not shoved aside, just moved. As if someone had carefully, deliberately, placed it back after stepping out. I fumbled with my keys, barely able to shove them into the lock. The door swung open and my stomach lurched. The air inside felt different, like someone had just been there. I don't know how long I stood there, knife clutched in one hand, phone in the other, waiting for something, anything, to happen. But nothing did. No movement, no sound, just my own ragged breathing. Slowly I checked every corner of the apartment, every cabinet, every inch of space where someone could hide. Nothing. And yet, the feeling remained, wrapping around my chest like a vice. I grabbed my bag, stuffed whatever I could into it, and left. I didn't care where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there. The landlord barely reacted when I told him I was breaking the lease. He just nodded, almost like he wasn't surprised. I didn't press him for answers. I didn't want to know. I moved out that night, never looked back. But sometimes, when I'm alone in my new place, I think about that hole in the storage unit, about the Polaroid from weeks before, about the fact that, for God knows how long, someone had been watching me, living under me, walking through my apartment while I slept. And worst of all, I have no idea who they were, or where they are now. I've always been that person who documents everything. Ever since I got my first DSLR in high school, I've had this obsession with capturing moments. Sunsets on campus, my coffee before class, the vintage camera I scored at a flea market. It wasn't just about photography, it was about sharing. Instagram, Snapchat, even Twitter. I was on all of them. People liked my posts, commented on my setups, asked where I got my gear. It felt good, like I had an audience who actually cared. But looking back, I realize now that I was way too careless about what I shared. That night started like any other. It was a Friday, and most of my friends had gone out, but I wasn't in the mood. I had a long day of classes, and all I wanted was to curl up in my apartment, edit some photos, and maybe binge-watch something. I remember snapping a quick shot of my dimly lit living room, the fairy lights, my open laptop, the half-empty coffee mug, and posting it with a casual caption. Finally, a night to myself. Home alone, just me and my camera. The second I hit post, I didn't think twice. Why would I? Maybe 20 minutes passed before I heard it. A noise, just outside my door. At first I thought it was my upstairs neighbor Noah. He was always dropping stuff, weights, shoes, whatever. But this wasn't coming from above. It was in the hallway. A slow, deliberate shuffling, like someone adjusting their footing. My heart did this weird little skip, but I brushed it off. The walls in my building were thin, and people were always coming and going. Still, something about it made me uneasy. I turned off the TV just to listen. Silence. A long stretch of it. Like whoever was outside was standing perfectly still. Then the sound again, closer this time. Right outside my apartment. My stomach clenched. I told myself it was nothing, maybe just someone waiting for the elevator. But then the worst possible thing happened. The handle of my front door rattled. Not a gentle touch. Not an accident, a deliberate testing motion, like someone was trying to see if it was locked. my breath caught in my throat. I stared at the door, frozen, waiting for something else to happen. The handle rattled again, harder this time. My heart pounded so loud I could hear it in my ears. I scrambled to mute my phone, suddenly terrified that a notification sound might give me away. My apartment wasn't big, and if someone was outside listening, they'd know I was in here. I thought about calling 911, but what would I even say? Hey, someone jiggled my doorknob? That wasn't a crime. That was paranoia. I crept toward the peephole, my socks silent against the hardwood. I was expecting to see a neighbor, maybe some drunk college kid who got the wrong door. But when I peeked out, my stomach dropped. There was a man standing there. Not knocking, not moving, just standing completely still, facing my door. He wasn't wearing a hoodie or a mask, nothing dramatic like that. He looked normal. Average height, dark jeans, a gray jacket. If I'd seen him on the street, I wouldn't have thought twice. But there was something deeply wrong about the way he just stood there, as if he knew I was watching. I backed away from the door, heart hammering. My brain raced through my options. Call someone? My best friend Emma was out. Probably wouldn't pick up. The campus police? Again, what would I say? My hands were shaking as I locked myself in my bedroom, pressing my back against the door. I wished I hadn't posted that picture. Home alone. I had practically invited this, but no one could have found me that fast, right? That post had barely been up for half an hour. Then, my phone buzzed. A DM on Instagram. I hesitated before unlocking my screen, my fingers clammy against the glass. The message was from an account I didn't recognize. No profile picture, no posts. Just one chilling line. Nice apartment. You should really lock your windows too. A cold wave of nausea hit me. My apartment was on the second floor. The windows weren't exactly accessible, not unless you had a ladder or some serious determination. My hands trembled as I clutched my phone, my mind scrambling for an explanation. Maybe it was a sick joke. Someone from campus messing with me? But how would they know my windows were unlocked? The only way they could know was if they were already here. I forced myself to move, my body screaming with adrenaline. My bedroom window was to my left, the blinds half open. I reached for them slowly, terrified of what I might see. The alley below was empty. No movement, no lurking figure. But that didn't mean I was safe. I slammed the window shut and locked it, my breath shaky. I had to check the others. My apartment wasn't big, just a small one-bedroom, but in that moment, it felt enormous. Every step toward the living room felt like an eternity. The apartment was silent, except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. I pressed myself against the wall, inching toward the last unlocked window near the kitchen. My fingers curled around the frame, ready to shut it, when I noticed something that made my stomach twist into knots. The window was already halfway down. I hadn't touched it. I was sure I hadn't left it like that. A rush of air moved the curtain slightly, and for the first time I felt like I wasn't alone. I shoved the window shut, locking it in one frantic motion. My breathing was too loud, my chest rising and falling in rapid bursts. I needed to do something. Call the police, get out, anything. But as I reached for my phone, another noise sent ice through my veins. This time, it wasn't at the door. It was behind me. The softest, barely there sound of a floorboard creaking. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my balance. The apartment was dark except for the faint glow from my laptop screen. My eyes darted to the shadows near the hallway. Nothing, no movement. But that sound, it had come from inside. I was sure of it. My pulse was a drum in my ears as I forced myself to step forward, scanning every corner, every dark space. My closet door was slightly ajar. I hadn't left it like that. I gripped my phone so tight my knuckles ached. My thumb hovered over the call button for 911. My gut screamed at me to run, to get out. but a morbid kind of fear kept me rooted to the spot. I took one slow step toward the closet, then another. The door creaked as I pushed it open. My own reflection stared back at me from the mirror inside. The closet was empty, but the uneasy feeling didn't go away. Something was wrong. A sudden vibration in my hand made me jump. My phone lit up with another message from the same anonymous account. "You're fast." That was it. Just 2 words. My stomach twisted. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. That was enough. I bolted. I grabbed my keys and ran out of my apartment, not stopping until I was outside, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I called the police from the parking lot. By the time they arrived, my apartment was exactly as I'd left it. Windows locked, door shut, no sign of forced entry. No sign of anyone. They didn't find anything, but I knew what I heard. I knew someone had been inside. I deleted my social media that night. Wiped everything. I never posted my location again. I still don't know who it was, or how they got in. But sometimes, late at night when I'm home alone, I swear I can hear it again. That barely there sound of a floorboard creaking just behind me. I moved into that apartment complex out of pure necessity. It wasn't the kind of place you chose. It was the kind of place you settled for. The walls were thin, the stairwells smelled like mildew, and the parking lot had more potholes than pavement. But the rent was cheap, and after my divorce, I didn't have many options. I worked late shifts at a diner across town, getting home well past midnight most nights. It wasn't ideal, but it was what I could afford. I told myself I didn't mind, until I noticed him. At first I thought he was just another tenant. The complex wasn't exactly full of friendly faces, and people mostly kept to themselves. But this man, he never went inside. I started noticing him a few weeks after I moved in. He would stand near the edge of the parking lot just outside the glow of the streetlights, always watching. I never saw him smoking, never saw him on a phone. He was just there. At first I brushed it off. Maybe he was waiting for someone, or maybe he lived nearby and liked to take late-night walks. I tried not to think about it, but every time I came home, there he was. It was when I started altering my routine to avoid him that I realized how much he was getting under my skin. If I saw him standing there as I pulled into the lot, I'd circle the block and wait a few minutes before coming back. Sometimes he was gone. Other times he was still there, unmoving. I started parking closer to my building, sprinting up the stairs instead of taking the elevator. My heart would hammer in my chest until I was safely inside, the door locked behind me. I felt ridiculous. He hadn't done anything. He had never approached me, never said a word. But that was the worst part. He was always just there, like he was waiting for something. Then came the night I got home late. Later than usual. The diner had been short-staffed, and I was exhausted. I hadn't even thought about him until I stepped out of my car and heard it. The sound of footsteps. Slow, deliberate, behind me. My stomach turned to ice. I didn't want to look, but I forced myself. A quick glance over my shoulder. It was him, closer than ever before. I didn't think. I just moved. My keys were already in my hand and I gripped them so tightly my knuckles turned white. I took off toward the stairwell, practically leaping up the steps 2 at a time. My heart pounded against my ribs, and my breath came in short, panicked bursts. I could still hear his footsteps. Not running, just walking. Steady, unhurried, as if he knew there was no need to rush. My hands trembled as I fumbled with my keys at my door, my vision blurring from sheer panic. He was right behind me. I could feel it. The moment the lock clicked open, I threw myself inside and slammed the door shut, locking it just as something heavy pressed against it. I backed away, my entire body shaking. For a moment, There was only silence. Then a shift. A soft scrape of fabric against the wood. I knew he was still there. Holding my breath, I crept toward the peephole, my pulse thundering in my ears. I expected to see him walking away, maybe standing a few feet back. But when I looked through the tiny glass circle, my stomach dropped. He wasn't leaving. He was standing directly in front of my door, so close that all I could see was the top of his head. He was waiting. I didn't know what to do. My phone was still in my purse, which I'd dropped somewhere in the panic. I thought about calling the police, but what would I even say? A man was standing outside my door? He hadn't broken in, hadn't threatened me, hadn't done anything illegal. But my instinct screamed that something was very, very wrong. I pressed my back against the far wall, my eyes locked on the door as if staring at it could somehow keep him out. I willed him to leave. Minutes passed, then more, and then, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the shadow in the peephole shifted. He moved, but not away. The next sound made my skin go cold. A soft tap, not a knock, just the faintest tap of a fingertip against the wood. Tap, 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 like he was testing the door, like he was waiting for me to respond. I didn't respond. I didn't move. I barely even breathed. My fingers dug into the wall behind me as I watched the door, every muscle in my body locked in place. The tapping stopped. Silence stretched out so long I started to think, maybe he was gone. Maybe I imagined it. But then something even worse happened. I heard him exhale. A slow, controlled breath, so close to the door it sounded like he was pressing his mouth against it. My stomach twisted. I wanted to scream, to yell for help, but my voice was trapped in my throat. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the sound vanished. No footsteps, no creaking floorboards, nothing. I waited, my body tense, listening for any sign of movement. After what felt like forever, I forced myself to inch toward the peephole. My hands trembled as I leaned in, my pulse hammering in my ears. He was gone. The hallway was empty. No shadow, no figure. Just the dim, flickering light of the old ceiling fixture. I wanted to believe he had finally left, that it was over. But something about the way he had stood there, so patient, so still, made my skin crawl. I barely slept that night. Every tiny noise sent a jolt of panic through me. I pushed a chair against the door, kept my phone in my hand, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. The next morning, when I finally worked up the nerve to step outside, I noticed something I hadn't before. On the floor, just beneath my peephole, was a single, small smudge, like the oily imprint of a forehead pressed against the door. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep moving, pretending I hadn't seen it, pretending it didn't mean what I thought it did. I never saw him again after that night. I don't know why he was there or what he wanted. Maybe he got bored. Maybe he found someone else, or maybe he was just testing me to see how easy it would be to get inside. I don't know, and I don't want to know. A month later, I broke my lease and moved out. It cost me nearly everything I had, but I didn't care, because sometimes the worst kind of fear isn't the kind that chases you. It's the kind that waits, and I had no intention of finding out what he had been waiting for. I still don't know how they knew, how they found this place, how they knew I'd be alone. It's been almost a year, and I still replay that night in my head like a movie I wish I could forget. My boyfriend Eric and I had just moved into our new rental house. Nothing fancy, just a small 2-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood outside of Denver. We were excited, ready for a fresh start. After years of crammed apartments, it felt like a step up, a real home. The first week was a blur of unpacking, late-night takeout, and figuring out which cabinets made the least noise when we opened them. It finally felt like things were falling into place. Then everything changed. It happened on a Tuesday evening. Eric was working late, and I had the house to myself. I remember feeling completely at ease. I had lit a candle, put on a show in the background, and was scrolling through my phone on the couch. I didn't even hear them at first. The first sound was more of a thud than a knock, like someone shoving against the door frame. Then, before I could process it, a second, much louder crash. The front door burst open so hard it slammed against the wall. My stomach dropped. I was frozen for a second, my mind struggling to catch up with reality. By the time I jumped up, 2 men were already inside. They were wearing masks, cheap plastic Halloween masks that made their expressions even more unsettling. One was taller than the other, broad-shouldered, moving like he'd done this before. The other was leaner, jittery, gripping a gun so tightly his knuckles were white. "Sit down," the taller one barked, motioning to the couch. I felt my legs buckle beneath me as I obeyed. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. At first, I thought it was a robbery. I was ready to hand over my phone, my laptop, whatever they wanted. But then the taller man leaned in closer, his voice lowering. "Where is it?" he demanded. I swallowed hard. Where is what? My voice barely came out, barely sounded like mine. The man's eyes narrowed behind the mask. "Don't play dumb, we know it's here." I shook my head, my hands trembling as they rested on my lap. I had no idea what they were talking about. Cash? Jewelry? Drugs? My mind raced through every possible thing they could be after, but nothing made sense. This wasn't a random break-in. They weren't here for money. They were here for something specific, something I didn't even know existed. The shorter guy shifted on his feet, glancing toward the front window like he was checking for headlights. He was nervous, more unpredictable. The gun in his hand wasn't just for show. I could feel it in the way he held it, like he'd use it if things didn't go their way. "We don't have time for this," he muttered. The taller one didn't even look at him. He just kept staring at me, like he was trying to read my face. "Listen," he said, his tone eerily calm now. "You just moved in, right? You don't even know what you have." He took a slow step closer. "But we do." I shook my head again, my breath coming out in short, panicked bursts. "I swear, I don't know what you're talking about." My voice cracked on the last word. The taller man exhaled sharply like he was losing patience. He turned to his partner. "Check the bedrooms." The shorter guy nodded and took off down the hall, his footsteps heavy against the old hardwood floors. I wanted to run, to make a break for the door while he was distracted, but the taller man must have read my thoughts. "Don't," he warned, shifting his weight just enough to remind me that he wasn't afraid to stop me himself. From the hallway I heard drawers being yanked open, closet doors slamming. Whatever they were looking for, they weren't finding it. The tension in the room thickened. The man in front of me tapped his fingers against his thigh like he was weighing his options. Then he leaned down, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. The last guy knew exactly what we meant. My blood ran cold. The last guy? I had no idea who lived here before us, but suddenly, that felt like the most important piece of information in the world. A loud crash from the bedroom made me jump. The shorter guy came storming back, shaking his head. "Nothing," he spat. "It's not here." The taller man sighed, his jaw tightening. For a second I thought maybe they'd just leave. Maybe they'd realize they were wrong and disappear into the night. But then the taller man tilted his head, studying me again. "She's lying," he said. And just like that, I knew this wasn't over. The shorter guy clenched his jaw, gripping the gun tighter. "Then we make her talk." My stomach twisted. My whole body felt cold, like my blood had stopped moving. "I'm not lying," I said quickly, my voice shaking. "I don't know what you want, I swear." The taller man sighed again, but this time it sounded almost disappointed, like I was wasting his time. He turned, scanning the room, Then his eyes landed on my phone, still sitting on the coffee table where I'd left it. He grabbed it and held it up. "Who else knows you're here?" I swallowed hard. "My boyfriend. He's on his way home." It was a lie, and I knew they could probably tell. The shorter guy scoffed, shaking his head, but the taller one just kept looking at me, considering. Then he did something that sent my heart into a full sprint. He unlocked my phone. Just like that. No hesitation, no wrong attempts. My stomach dropped. He knew my passcode. He scrolled for a second, his thumb moving over the screen, then turned the phone around to show me. It was a text conversation. One I had never seen before. The messages were between someone named T and a number I didn't recognize, but the texts, they were from me, or at least, from my number. T, it's still in the house. Me, are you sure? T, yeah, it was never taken. Me, then we need to move fast. My breath hitched. My head was spinning. That's not me, I whispered, my voice barely there. My whole body was trembling now, but not just from fear. From something worse, something deeper. The realization that this wasn't just a home invasion. This was something else. Something I wasn't supposed to be a part of. The taller man studied my face, and for the first time I saw something shift in his expression. A flicker of hesitation? Doubt? Then, just as suddenly, he looked at his partner. "We're leaving." The shorter guy didn't move. "What? We can't just—" "She doesn't know," the taller man cut him off, his voice firm. "She's not part of this." He turned back to me, tilting his head slightly like he was seeing me for the first time. "You really don't know, do you?" I shook my head, my throat too tight to speak. My entire body was locked in place, frozen between terror and confusion. What did they mean? What was in this house? Who had been using my number? My mind spiraled with questions, but before I could get a single answer, the taller man tossed my phone back onto the couch. "Forget this happened," he said, his voice low but heavy with something that felt like a warning. Then he nodded to his partner. "We're done here." The shorter guy looked like he wanted to argue, but after a second he gave in. Without another word, they both moved toward the door, disappearing into the night as fast as they had come. I sat there paralyzed, listening to their footsteps fade, then to the silence that followed. It took me almost a full minute before I could move. My hands shook as I grabbed my phone, my stomach twisting as I scrolled through my messages. The conversation was gone. Erased. Like it had never been there. That was a year ago. Eric and I moved out of that house a month later, but the questions still haunt me. Who was T? What were they looking for? And why did they think I was involved? I checked everything. Old records, previous tenants, even police reports. But nothing stood out. The house had no history, no reported crimes, no missing items. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder. If they had the wrong person, then where was the right one? And what were they really trying to find? I was 17 when this happened. It was a Wednesday in late October and I had stayed home sick from school. Not the fun kind of sick where you get to binge-watch TV and eat soup, but the miserable, head-pounding, can't-breathe-through-your-nose kind. My mom had left for work around 7:30, and my dad was on a business trip, so I had the house to myself. I spent most of the morning half asleep, scrolling through my phone under a pile of blankets, trying to ignore the dull ache behind my eyes. The house was silent, aside from the occasional hum of the heater kicking on, and the muted sound of leaves scraping against the windows. That's why, when I heard the front door open, I knew something was wrong. At first, I thought maybe I imagined it. I sat up in bed, heart suddenly hammering. The house was old. Sometimes it creaked like someone was walking around even when no one was home. But then, clear as day, I heard the door shut with a quiet click. It wasn't loud or rushed like my mom coming home in a hurry. It was careful, almost deliberate. I froze, my phone still clutched in my hand. My mom wasn't supposed to be home until at least 5. No one else had a key. My chest tightened as I strained to hear more, every muscle in my body locked in place. For a few seconds, nothing. Just silence. Then, the sound of slow, steady footsteps on the hardwood floor. Someone was inside the house. My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might throw up. I moved as quietly as I could, slipping out of bed and locking my bedroom door with a soft snick. The lock wasn't much, just a flimsy little turn lock on the knob, but at that moment it felt like the only thing separating me from whatever was out there. I pressed my ear to the door, barely breathing. The footsteps had stopped, and then they started again, this time on the stairs. Slow, measured, one step at a time, like whoever it was knew I was up here. I didn't have a weapon, nothing I could use to defend myself except maybe the metal lamp on my nightstand. My mind raced, running through every possibility. A burglar? A neighbor checking in? But why would a neighbor be so quiet? Why wouldn't they call out my name? No, whoever was in my house wasn't supposed to be here, and they were coming straight for me. I backed away from the door, my hands trembling. The air in my room felt thick, like the walls were closing in. My mind was screaming at me to do something, call 911, climb out the window, hide, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I just stood there, staring at the door, as the footsteps reached the top of the stairs and paused, right outside my room. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall, my heart pounding so hard I thought whoever was on the other side of the door could hear it. Then came the worst part. The doorknob rattled. Not violently, not like someone trying to break in, just a quiet, testing twist. My blood turned to ice. They were checking if it was locked. I reached for my phone, hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. My fingers fumbled to unlock the screen, but my brain wasn't working right. I kept messing up my passcode. Another slow twist of the knob. Then silence. My breath hitched in my throat. Were they still there? Were they listening for me? Every second felt like an eternity. I finally got my phone unlocked and started typing out a text to my mom. But before I could hit send, there was a soft tap, tap, tap against my door. 3 slow knocks. Gentle, almost polite, like whoever was standing there wanted me to open up voluntarily. My entire body seized up. That was when I knew. Whoever this was, they weren't just here to rob the place. They knew I was inside. And they wanted me to know they knew. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, gripping my phone so hard my knuckles turned white. My brain was scrambling for answers, for explanations, but nothing made sense. This wasn't normal. A burglar wouldn't knock. A neighbor wouldn't sneak up the stairs like this. And the way they tested the lock, it was like they were waiting for me to make a mistake. Then, just when I thought they might have left, I heard something worse than the knocking. A whisper, right against the door. I couldn't make out the words. It was too soft, too low. But the sound of it sent a cold shiver down my spine. My stomach dropped, and I had to cover my mouth to stop myself from making a noise. Every instinct in my body told me, don't respond, don't move, don't even exist. I swiped to dial 911, but before I could press the call button, the whispering stopped. A beat of silence. Then the footsteps. Walking away. Down the hall, slow and steady, like they had all the time in the world. I listened as they passed my brother's empty bedroom, then the guest room. Then finally, they reached the stairs. Each step creaked under their weight, growing fainter as they descended. I wanted to believe they were leaving, that this nightmare was over, but I knew better. I could feel it in my bones. This wasn't someone giving up. This was someone playing a game. I forced myself to move, inching toward the window, barely daring to breathe. If they were leaving, I had to see. I had to make sure. I peeked through the blinds, expecting to see someone slipping out the front door, but the street outside was empty. No car, no figure, nothing. The house was dead silent again, but that didn't mean I was safe. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. I kept staring out the window, waiting, expecting to see someone step into view. Maybe they'd be standing in the yard, looking up at my window. Maybe they'd be in the street, watching from a distance. But there was nothing. No movement at all. I turned back to my room, forcing myself to think. If they'd left through the front door, I would have heard it open and close. But I didn't. That meant they were still inside. The realization sent a fresh wave of panic through me. I was trapped. If I tried to run, I might come face to face with whoever was in my house. If I stayed, I was just waiting for them to come back. I pressed my ear to the door again, my breath shaky and uneven. Nothing. No footsteps, no whispers, just silence. And then, a sound from the closet. Not loud, just a tiny shift, like someone moving a foot. My whole body locked up. My closet was open when I went to bed. I was sure of it. But now, the door was almost closed. Not all the way. Just slightly ajar. A wave of cold dread washed over me. I had been so focused on the door, on the footsteps, that I never even thought to check behind me. What if they had been in here the whole time? What if they had never left? My throat was dry. My pulse pounded in my ears. I felt like a deer caught in headlights, completely frozen. And then, as if to confirm my worst fear, the closet door moved, just an inch. Just enough to let me know. They knew I was looking. I couldn't stay in that room. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to run, to get out now. But I knew I had to be smart. If I made a noise, if I moved too suddenly, whoever was in that closet might decide to act. I took the smallest step back, gripping my phone so tightly my fingers ached. My breath was shallow, my whole body locked up with fear. Then, my phone buzzed. A single vibration. A text from my mom. Just one word. Home. I couldn't think. I lunged for the doorknob, twisted it so fast I almost tore the lock off, and threw the door open. The hallway was empty. The stairs stretched out in front of me, leading straight to the front door. I sprinted. My socks slipped on the wood, my shoulders slammed into the wall, but I didn't stop. I flew down the stairs, grabbed the front door handle and yanked it open just as my mom's car pulled into the driveway. I stumbled outside, gasping, shaking so hard I could barely stand. My mom's face twisted with confusion as she stepped out of the car. "What are you doing? What's wrong?" she asked, concern creeping into her voice. I turned back to the house, expecting to see someone standing in the doorway watching me. But the door stood open, revealing nothing but an empty hallway. I told her everything. She called the cops and they searched the house from top to bottom. They found nothing. No signs of forced entry. No footprints, no unlocked windows, nothing missing. The officers told my mom it was probably a bad dream, maybe a fever hallucination from being sick. But I know what I heard. I know what I saw. That night, I locked my bedroom door and stared at my closet for hours, too afraid to close my eyes. I haven't stayed home alone since, and I never leave my closet door open anymore.